Hello?
Hello and welcome to today's radio. We're from Bond Adams, and today we're just going to talk a little bit about transfer of equities. So, Bond Adams Solicitors, we specialize in numerous departments. The way to contact us is through 0116 285 8080. You can also email lawyer@bondadams.com. Our head office is at Richmond House, 94 London Road, Leicester, LE20QS. So we start off with the transfer of equity. So this is a legal process used to add or remove someone from title deeds of a property, and it's known as transfer of equity. There could be many reasons why one may decide to use this legal process. One of the reasons could be when there's a breakdown of relationship. So a transfer of equity would be used here to divide the assets. There could also be because you're entering a new relationship, so the transfer of equity could be used to add your new partner to the deeds. You could also be because you're buying out the equity of a joint owner, so the transfer of equity could be used here for family members if they want to transfer equity to their children or any other family member to be more tax efficient. This is a simple legal process if all parties involved agree to the outcome. The main reason for this is that no searches would need to be carried out. Searches usually take about 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. It's also important to look at each transaction independently, as this process can become more complex when there's disagreements or if there's any mortgages involved.
There are two types of property transfers. One is known as a full transfer of ownership. This is carried out when the whole property is being gifted to another person. And the other type of transfer is part transfer of ownership. This is when a sole owner wishes to transfer a share in the property to someone else. What are the key stages of transfer of equity? This legal process may well involve more than one solicitor, as one solicitor can not act for both parties. This guarantees all parties involved receive efficient, independent advice. The key stages a lawyer will guide you through are reviewing the title deeds. Your property deeds will be analysed from the land registry in readiness for the transfer of equity. To prepare the transfer deed documents. Once your transfer deed is ready, a meeting will be arranged with your solicitor to sign the deed in the presence of a witness. Written consent must be provided from any mortgage or secured lenders, banks, or building societies. Register the deed transfer at land registry. The fee will depend on the property's value.
So, as we said before, sometimes a transaction can get more complex when there's a mortgage involved. So, what happens when there is a mortgage involved? So, usually, when there's a mortgage involved, the individual leaving the deed would also be required to be released from the terms and conditions. There are a few ways which this can be carried out, and these methods will be determined on the circumstances of the transfer of equity. So, what we look at is discharge the mortgage in basic terms, pay off the mortgage. And upon the circumstances where for example, a co-worker buys out a share of the property approval, there would need to be property approval, and you would need to be sort of from the lender to transfer the property as part as a buyout. Remortgage your property to accumulate funds to discharge the mortgage. So, what about stamp duty tax implications for transfer of equity? So, as we mentioned, you could be transfer of equity just to be more tax efficient. So, tax stamp duty could be charged if you want to transfer the property into joint names. This usually occurs when the house is subject to mortgage. So, if you decide to add a name to your title, it would be a good idea to put a deed of trust in place which sets out the ownership of the property. Um, if you're looking for further advice and assistance on transfer of equity, we at Bond Adams can advise you and help you understand your options and any decisions in relation to this or about your future. Our lawyers are highly trained to support you and provide you with the best outcome you can possibly have. So that's all for transfer of equity. We're going to talk a little bit more about property law because both of us specialize more in property law. So, what is property law? So, sometimes it's known as real estate law and it deals with transactions relating to residential and commercial property, and it covers specialist areas such as property finance, mortgage, lending, or social housing.
So, personal property law takes all legal aspects of buying and selling personal or residential property. Property lawyers deal with domestic or international clients who wish to buy or sell properties in the UK or abroad. Commercial property law involves dealing with business properties or land that generates profit for the owner. Commercial property lawyers take the center of all legal aspects of buying and selling commercial properties. Clients can be from all sectors, such as farmers, hotel owners, and charities.
So the main subjects of property law, there's many different types, but these are some of them. One is a transfer of land. There is ownership of land. There could be disputes over land, tenancies, licenses, easements, mortgages, and adverse possessions. So what does a property lawyer do? So, this area of the law mainly involves transactional based work, such as buying and selling or rental of property, but there is a litigation side. So, other related areas of law include landlord and tenant, as well as construction and planning law. The practice area is split into residential and commercial work. So, residential work is likely to take place at high street or regional based firms, and clients are usually the public. This type of work sees lots of clients contact over the phone dealing with developments in their property buying experience. And depending on how many cases are being dealt with, it can be time pressured. So, lawyers have to keep track of which stage each of their clients are at in their property buying process. The type of work that you deal with involves negotiation of land contracts, drafting commercial leases, and due diligence. Matters range from large scale developments to small business premises for a sole trader.
Why property law is interesting. Arguably the most relatable of all, the area of property law affects every individual in society, whether that be if you choose to rent or those investing in large-scale property projects. On some level, most people will be faced with understanding property law at some point in their lives, making this area of law one that interests many. Skills required to be a property lawyer. Multitasking is essential to deal with multiple parties when bringing a transaction together. Negotiating and drafting are also important, especially in commercial property matters. The speed at which a transaction gets completed can depend on the lawyer's ability to work with the other parties involved. Therefore, a good relationship building skills are needed. The skill is particularly important in residential conveyancing as clients become often emotional throughout the process. A good manner which A good manner with clients will be appreciated and may result in increased referrals.
So, how do you become a property lawyer? So, to work as a solicitor, you can either take the Solicitor's Qualifying Examination, which is the SQE, or if you are eligible, you can study the Legal Practice course, which is the LPC. If you qualify through the SQE, you will also need to complete 2 years of qualifying work experience, which is QWE. And to prepare for the SQE, there's many recommended studying courses which have been designed to give knowledge and skill for a successful career as a solicitor. If you are eligible to study the LPC, you will need to get a 2-year training contract with a law firm. Once you complete your 2-year training contract or QWE, you can apply to the Solicitors Regulation Authority, which is the SRA, to be admitted as a solicitor. To become a barrister, you'll need to have completed an undergrad law degree, or if you're a non-law graduate, a conversion course before completing the bar. Work experience in the area is as important as qualifying as a solicitor, so gaining as much residential and commercial experience as possible will help. This doesn't really need to be legal based. Many people come from the housing and care industry to become a property lawyer. You'll also need to follow all the steps to become a qualified solicitor. Gaining property law work experience. So these days, gaining experience in property law is possible via virtual work experience or online vacation schemes, or alternatively long-term internships. So at Bond Adams, we have quite a few people who have done the LPC. We also have people who are qualifying through the SQE at the moment. So these are the different routes that you can look at to become a property lawyer. So the next thing we're going to look at is residential conveyancing. So what is residential conveyancing? So if you're interested in buying or selling a property, residential conveyancing, you may have heard of that term before, but what exactly does it mean? So residential conveyancing refers to the legal process of purchasing or selling a property. It's the action of transferring the contractual title of a property from one owner to another. And the entire property conveyancing process will be completed by a property solicitor or conveyancer.
The process of residential conveyancing. The process of residential conveyancing is when you offer when an offer is accepted on a house and finished when an individual receives the keys. The process usually takes between 8 to 12 weeks to complete, but can vary depending on your situation. Occasionally, the process can take much longer to complete if there are any issues. It's extremely important that each step of the process is completed efficiently to avoid delaying the property conveyancing process. Transferring a property from one owner to another is complex and requires a lot of work. When you buy a property, you will need a conveyancer or property solicitor to complete the residential conveyancing process. We will now highlight key stages in the purchase process.
So firstly, you are given a quote. This is the breakdown of fees, which tells you what you'll be paying for, any disbursements, the legal fees, any registrations of the sort. We're given a memorandum of sale. Once the sale is agreed, the estate agent supplies the memorandum of sale to the parties. This provides the full details of the transaction and it allows the solicitors to start processing the transaction. Then you open the purchase file. Firstly, the conveyancer will open the purchase file for your new property. This involves sending you a letter to explain the terms of business and requesting items such as ID, evidence of source of funds, and a payment on account, usually depending on the purchase price, usually about £400 to £500. In addition, you will complete a purchase questionnaire allowing you to raise any queries you have regarding the property. At this stage, you will be given a fixed fee estimate based on the information provided. The cost can change if the legal work becomes more complicated. Contracts. Your conveyancer will receive the drawn-up draft contract pack from the seller's solicitors. The contract pack will be made up with the following documentation. So firstly, a draft contract, official copy and title plan, the property information form. This is an information form completed by the sellers about the property. A fittings and contents form, which is a form completed by the seller confirming what will be left at the property, i.e. cookers, washers, beds, etc. An energy performance certificate, any supporting documents such as warranties, guarantees, planning permission, or building regulations. If it's a leasehold, there will also be a copy of the lease as well as key information from the landlord. Once in receipt of the contracts, your conveyancer will check all documentation to make sure nothing is missing and that there are no problems with the title. We then conduct searches. This is a vital part of the conveyancing and property search process. The searches done on most properties are as follows. A local search. This confirms if the road at the property is maintained by the local authority or if it is private. It also confirms any planning or building regulation applications, among many other important things. There's also a drainage search. This confirms if the drains are maintained by the water board or are private. It also confirms the location of water sewage pipes. And an environmental search. This provides details of the property and surrounding area in relation to possible contaminated land and flooding, amongst other issues. In Yorkshire, a mining search is also often required. A mortgage offer. So if the transaction is part funded by a mortgage, the conveyancer will check the mortgage offer to make sure all the details are correct and deal with lender's standards and special conditions. Provide expert legal advice. The conveyancer will also provide expert legal advice and raise queries on not only the title to the property but also in relation to any of the searches carried out. Stamp duty payment. The conveyancer will calculate and pay the stamp duty bill on your behalf. However, following the impact of COVID-19, the Chancellor has announced a temporary stamp duty holiday on properties. This was during COVID-19. To stay up to date with the latest changes on stamp duty, you can visit the government website, which will tell you how much stamp duty you need to pay depending on the property that you're purchasing. Collect and transfer funds. The conveyancer will ask for your deposit being 10% of the purchase price and will arrange to transfer the funds to the seller's solicitors on completion. Exchange of contracts. Once your conveyancer is satisfied that all queries and issues are resolved on your transaction, you'll be asked to sign the contract documentation. Exchange of contracts is when all parties formally agree to the completion date. When you exchange, the completion date is fixed. Exchange and completion can also be done on the same day, or there can be an agreed amount of time between exchange and completion. And then completion. Once exchange has taken place, you will receive your keys on the day of completion. Your conveyancer will ensure that mortgage funds are drawn down in time for completion. You will collect the keys from the estate agent when the funds have been received by the seller's solicitors. Post-completion. Once completion has taken place, your conveyancer will apply to land registry to register your ownership of the property. This will take several months after completion.
The importance of property conveyancing. The importance of property conveyancing is to ensure an individual buys a property that has no unknown restrictions or problems, and the property will sell without any issues later on.
So that's all we have for today. We're just explaining the conveyancing in terms of residential conveyancing. We did look at transfer of equity If you do have any property matters that you would like to discuss or any other litigation, immigration matters, Bond Adams do deal with this. As I said, we are contactable on 0116-285-8080. You could also email lawyers@bondadams.com, or alternatively visit our offices at London Road 94, Richmond House, Leicester, LE20QS. Thank you for your time.